Very good to see you all joining us this evening. Great. So first of all, welcome to you all. Thanks a lot for coming. We've got an interesting range of people joining us today. We've got members of the original 2019 syndicate, and it's great to have you with us. We've got either joining members of the 2020 syndicates, or people who are maybe giving it some consideration, or people who would like to find out more. And we've even got some guests joining us who are part of our kosher wine syndicate as well, or again, are potentially considering joining us on that journey. And Basim, excellent, good to see you arriving. Excellent, good. Puts everyone in alphabetical order on the list here. So sorry if you've arrived and I haven't said hello. You've been automatically put into. Frank, hello. Gareth as well. Great, good. We're doing well on the numbers. So as I was saying, we've got a wide range of people joining this evening. Jonty, hello. Some of whom are more familiar with this process than others. Some are completely unfamiliar. But the most important person in the room, well, on the screen this evening is Brian. Brian from Domaine de Montille. And Brian is the sort of the linking factor this evening, because Brian and Etienne de Montille at the Domaine are looking after completing the élevage of the 2019 syndicate hospice barrels, the white and the red. Will also be looking after the 2020 hospice syndicate barrels, and are also making our amazing kosher Burgundies as well. So Brian, there's a lot resting on your shoulders, my friend. Whatever you do, don't walk under a bus tomorrow. So great to have you with us, Brian. Perhaps. Well, I think before we hand over to you, Brian, maybe Nathan, would you like to just say a few words about the hospice generally, about the project, and then we'll hand over to Brian to talk about his involvement in the cuvées.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I mean, basically, guys, this is typical crowdfunding. Last year we had 36 shares. Each share is 24 bottles. And there were about 36 people, just under that, in the syndicate. Between us, we put together 2 barrels of red Pommard Premier Cru, Les Dames de la Charité, which Brian, lucky sod, Brian's going to be tasting and not us, and 1 barrel of Meursault Cuvée Gureux. These are hospice cuvées. I'm sure Brian will talk about them. Tom and I took strong advice and off-the-record tips right from the top. Ludivine Crivaux, the régisseur of the hospice, the winemaker at the Hospices de Beaune, and from Jasper Morris, who's the consultant to Christie's for the, I think that's what it's called, isn't he, Tom? The consultant to Christie's, and puts the catalogue together. And obviously, particularly from the people who are going to look after the lovely wine for us, Brian and Etienne de Montille. And then last year, of course, in the days when one could travel easily, Tom and I went along. Tom held the paddle and I hit him if he was trying to bid too much. We told everybody.
Here is the paddle.
He's got it.
Here's the paddle. Okay. This is the paddle, the winning paddle.
And it's quite nerve-wracking because I bought shares as well because I wanted some skin in the game. But it's quite nerve-wracking because, as you know, an auction is linear. Once you've lost it, you've lost it. And in fact, we bought the Pommard actually very slightly, about 92% of the. What I do is I set a nominal share price, which for this year, 2020, will be £100 for a bottle for red and 120 for white. And then we ask you to put in 80% up front and then the balance once we've actually completed the bid. We are prepared to no bid. It's your money and your money and my money as well. We're not going to just buy anything. But we take a lot of soundings, a lot of input, and we ended up, I wanted to keep in budget the first year, although it was very hairy on the white, but we actually ended up at £92 a bottle for the red and 99 for the white. The reason we're putting it up, we don't really have information this year because it's such a weird year. We don't yet have information on likely auction prices, but we think we want to have a bit more space to play on the whites. There's less of them, and we'd like to see if we can get a Premier Cru this year. Although, frankly, our Merceau Cuvée, I think you'll tell us, Brian, you know, it's 60% Premier Cru anyway, as these Hospices cuvées go. So I think we've done really very well. And that's it, basically. So last year we did 2 barrels of red, 1 barrel of white. We did take as much consensus from everybody. I remember texting around on the Saturday saying, oops, you know, the white's looking hairy, but we did manage to buy them. But for your safety and security, those of you on the 2020 syndicate, you know, we are prepared to no bid. If the wine's not, if it's not the right wine for us, then we won't get it. The wine, we bid for the wine at auction, pay the auctioneer's costs, and then Brian goes there personally and slogs it down from the Hospice in Beaune to, is it into Merceau, Brian?
Is the barrel in Merceau right now?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
The barrel's in Merceau, not Coligny, that's it. So the barrel, yeah. So the barrels come down from Merceau to Coligny, and then Brian and his team look after them for the next year and a half or so. I'm sure Brian's going to take us through the process and when bottling is due. And also, by the way, those of you who are in the 2019 syndicate, and when we come to the white, Brian needs to take soundings from us as to whether we want it transferred into an old barrel now. So there's actually a sort of syndicate decision to be made by the winemaker, but with our input as we're here today. So that's the basis of the process. We'll take sort of more questions on the process later on, but I think over to you, Brian, and can we taste the wine, please, and tell us about it, about its evolution, where we're up to with them.
Excellent. Just so everybody knows, hello everyone. I hope everybody's doing well. I cannot see everybody, so if somebody has a screen where they're able to see all the individuals, and if anybody has a question, don't hesitate to stop me, and we can address the question at the moment, because as soon as I keep rambling on and we're past that question, a lot of times we'll forget to go back to it. So that's no problem going through that. Welcome.
Brian, just briefly on that front, yeah. If people, if not everyone has their camera on either, so if people want to use the chat function and ask a question there, then we can feed those through to Brian as well. So just that's probably the quickest way. Sorry, Brian, over to you.
Sounds good. Sounds good. No, good input. Okay, so yes, I guess what we can do is we can start a little bit with the 2019 vintage and leading into the Hospices de Beaune pickup. We picked up all the Hospices de Beaune barrels at the end of January, at the beginning of February. This year was a little bit more complicated based on organizational stuff with the Hospice. Ludovine does a great job since she's taken over. She's taken over for about the last 5 years. I'm not quite sure exactly what, but in the end, we have had your barrels here since January, end of January, early February. I have both the wines in front of me right now, or actually all 3 of the wines. The Dame de Charité, I made an assemblage of the two barrels because it's part of that entire cuvée. And where our price is going to go for 2020, that's a great question. I think Nathan asked that question a little bit earlier. I know that the thing with 2020 is there's a little bit more volume in white. So the hopes or the anticipation of possibly coming up with a little bit more white might be a good angle to have. That being said, Merceau was one of the areas that wasn't necessarily as crop friendly as some of the other regions, which kind of falls in Merceau's hands over the last 10 years. That's been the case. So call it terre blanche, call it whatever you want, I'm quite sure, but we had a little bit less yields in Merceau than we did in some of the other regions. However, going back to the 19 vintage, 2019, it was a year, it was the hottest, it was one of the 5 hottest years and driest years on record in Burgundy, meaning that we had less rainfall from February to August through those months right there through those basic 6-month period, that the growing season, the heart of the growing season, than we have ever had. There was only 5 other months or 5 other vintages that fell into that same bracket. One was in the 50s, one was in the 60s, one was in the 70s. I know that for sure. I'm not quite sure where the others fall, but we ultimately had a very dry summertime that kind of created what we ended up hoping for was a lot of rain in August to help our crop a little bit, to give us a little bit higher yields. We didn't have that. In the end, what we have is we've got lovely concentrated wines that have an elegance, that a wonderful reputation journalistically. They've gotten great reviews and write-ups. We typically say that things that necessarily get massive write-ups from journalists aren't necessarily the most beautiful and enjoyable from the vigneron's perspective. 19s have an elegance and an acidity that's a little bit more present than the 2018s, and they have a wonderful length and coloration to them. That being said, the Meursault, the Gouraud, the 276 barrel that you guys purchased, that's in the cave, I have yet to take it out of the new oak at this point in time. Giving you a little bit of history, what Domaine de Montille started with Anthony Hansen, who used to be the old president of the Christie's Wine Group and ran Hospices de Beaune for a while. What I started when I got here at Domaine de Montille was to group people together that have purchased barrels, that have barrels in the same cuvée in common, such as your Dame de Charité, for example. This year we're doing an élevage of 6 barrels of Dame de Charité. Okay. When we do an élevage of 6 barrels of Dame de Charité, I can then throw out to the client base if they would like us to do an assemblage of a certain cuvée, which is the original cuvée of Dame de Charité. I literally have barrel number 33, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, and that's it. Those are the 6 barrels that I have. What I say to the clientele is that based on the cuvée, based on the fact that we receive it from Hospices de Beaune in 100% new oak, I give the clientele an opportunity to rack it and put into neutral barrels or something of a more neutral status to provide less new oak profile. Okay, when you have more than one barrel of a certain item, you're going to have a more consistent élevage of something. Okay, in the case of the Meursault, the Gouraud that we have, it is still in the new oak barrel. Now, coming from my perspective in 2019, I am not a massive fan of 100% new oak. However, barrels are also made by hand. And it's no different than anything else that is made by hand. And everything has its little idiosyncrasies and its details that go along with it. And when I taste and when I smell the aromatic profile of the Gouraud, it's not being overwhelmed by the new oak. That being said, I'm racking tomorrow other barrels, other white barrels at the Domaine. And this is perfect timing for us because we could theoretically rack the barrel of the Meursault and we could put it in more of a neutral barrel for its second winter. That's going to do 2 things if we do that. One, that's going to lessen the impact of the new oak profile aromatically, as well as tannin-wise and texture-wise in our mouth. But also, when you put it in an older barrel has a lot of pores that are sealed with acid, and it's going to breathe less. So consequently, it provides it into a little bit more reductive environment. And that reductive environment is no different than what I do with the Domaine wines at Domaine de Montille. After they spend a year in oak, I then rack them into a stainless steel tank, and that stainless steel tank provides a less oxygen atmosphere for the wine. So one of the decisions that we can make tonight is the style of wine that you guys would like to have for the Meursault. But what I can also say with that, with a grain of salt, is that it is showing really well. It is not overly impacted by its oak profile. And if it's not something that the clientele or the syndicate wants to drink tomorrow, then in a 4 or 5 year period, I believe the wine will have absorbed all the oak at that point in time. As Nathan said a little bit earlier in the conversation, the cuvée has Poroso in it, which is a premier cru, and it has Grand Charron, which is a very high-end village. It's one of the lieux-dits that's very more important in Meursault. So those are two terroirs that have a tendency to absorb oak, and they can stand up to those characters. If it was a Terre Blanche wine, just a Terre Blanche wine, I think I just lost somebody. Did I lose somebody, or are you guys losing me?
No, we're okay.
Yeah, all right. If it was a Terre Blanche wine, like a Castet or something that was more on the salinity side of things, I would say that we want to take it out of the new oak profile. But based on the volume of the wine and the aromatic profile and how the actual barrel is affecting the wine, it's very pleasant and very enjoyable. So that's something you guys can think about through our conversation tonight as we talk and describe other things. Okay.
So just remember, everybody, while Brian is tasting this, we should all be there with him. But there you are. You know, you can take it for the team, Brian, and tell us what it's like.
The 2019s have a lovely texture and a lovely weight to them, with a great acidity, a good persistence and length to the finish of the wine. The concentration of the fruit it's not like the 17s. The 17s were more Aryan. They showed the acid backbones more. The 18s as well were a similar profile, despite the fact that 2018 was a warm year. There was a lot more fruit in 2018. There was almost a third more fruit in 2018. So that volume of fruit needed the sunshine to ripen up the grapes. The profile that I'm looking at more right now, and the concentration that I'm looking at for the white, is more along the 2012 kind of scenario, where you have 2012 was a year that we had a little bit more botrytis, so you have the honey and the nut characteristic profile that goes along, but it's got nice persisted acidity. 2019 has that same kind of concentration and texture in your mouth as if you're drinking whole milk versus skim milk, but it also has a lovely crisp acidity backbone to it. So that's why it's able to stand up to the oak that it's currently sitting in. So racking the wine out of the new barrel into a once used barrel, and then doing another élevage of about call it 5 months or so, is not going to hurt the wine in any capacity whatsoever, based on the fact that the wine is in our cave. The cave is cold. It's limestone. It's a high humidity level. It holds onto its CO2 very well. So the wine's super fresh and super bright. And I think everybody's going to be very happy with the end result. No question about it. So there you go.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. That's super useful. I think it sort of sounds like, from what you're saying, that given the way you make wine for the Domaine, the barrels that you've made for the Hospice, from the Hospice wines before, that you're suggesting that we should go down the route of into a neutral barrel.
Unfortunately, I wish I could be as decisive as you want me to be, in the sense that there would be certain years that I would insist that we take it out of the new barrel. Okay. In this case, this vintage, this particular barrel, there's a marriage that holds on to the wine nicely. It is not an overall necessity. it comes down to more the group, the syndicate, the palate, the style of wine that you guys are looking for, which is going to determine to rack or not to rack. And if the style of wine is more precision and tension, it would be to rack. If it's more a little bit more opulent, yet it still has an acidic backbone by all means, but more on the opulent side of things, then I would say that we could leave it in the new oak. So.
Okay.
Well, given that we've got, I'm just trying to look around the room. We've got Daniel. I think you had whites.
Basim had whites.
Basim.
Yeah,
Peter is there. So we're here to make a decision for everybody. Andrew Palmer there. I'll start off just by saying my style in Meursault is more modern. I like a bit of precision and leanness to it. But if it was from the sound of it, it's quite a balanced decision. So if it was a bit fatter, I just keep it longer before I drunk it. So I'm fairly balanced. I'd slightly, because I've got white in here, I'd slightly err on the to put it into the neutral barrel mix.
Yeah, it's funny because whenever Nathan and I taste together, Nathan, you're always Genevieve and I tend to be Charm. I like
exactly. I'm Genevieve, Tom is Charm. Yeah. Exactly. Tom is charming and I'm stony. Anybody else on? I'm looking. Peter, Andrew, Basim. Any of you guys?
Brian, may I ask Brian a question, please?
Of course, please do.
You're tasting the wine at this moment. When do you think it will be good to drink? In how many years, or how long will it last? And would that be affected by the type of barrel that we have?
Good question. Good question. The wine is going to last 15, 20 years just based on the chemistry of the wine, meaning that the pH is at 315, so it's has a lot of acid to it, which basically is going to provide a linear backbone to the wine that is going to make it very stable. The wine is one of these vintages that has weight and texture to it, but it also has the acid profile that's going to make it palatable in a shorter period of time. It's not a 2004 or a 2007 or a 2011 or even some 14s that are going to last forever by all means. But they need time to develop into what their complexities to enjoy the wine. This wine will be very enjoyable probably by the time you get it, which will be in a year and a half, call it, or I don't know, a year, yeah, about just over a year. However, hopefully you're getting enough so that you can start opening a couple bottles in the early stages and that you'll have plenty for reserve for later on. The age-worthy portion of things is not going to be a question. It should not be a question or a doubt because it will last. I do not have any doubt in my mind that it will last over 10 years and it'll probably be a very good drinking Meursault after 15 years.
Okay.
Any other questions from other people in the White 19 syndicate? This feels like some kind of X Factor for Meursault.
Nathan is having a good time.
I'm loving it.
Nathan, it's Andrew here. You can have my vote. I'll go with whatever.
Peter?
I tend to agree with you, Nathan. The more modern Meursault is very palatable. And I think I would love to start drinking it not too late and not wait too long.
Jonty, I think
we're I'm on this. So Nathan described exactly my perspective on that. So I'm happy with that. I would say though that I'll be cutting across what my wife would prefer quite badly. So as long as everyone keeps quiet on that front, I'm happy to go with the audience.
None of us would want to be the none of us would want to start anything going on in the divorce courts, John.
And Daniel too. I think your thoughts.
Well, I have time, so so I would actually, and I like the opulent white, so I would rather go keep it in the new oak for a bit longer. That's my point.
Okay. Well, let's. I mean, I think let's. We'll probably sound out a few more people who went long on to the white this for the 19, and then we'll revert.
I think from Brian has a white share as well. Are you there, Brian?
Yes, yeah, I'm here, Nathan. Thanks. I'm probably a little bit more on the opulent side as well, but I'm happy to go either way.
Same for me. I mean, I'm happy to drink it early. I have a wide variety of wines, so I'm if it's on the more modern style, I'm happy with that as well. So
I would say here's my take on the wine tonight. Today it kind of reminds me a little bit stylistically, and I'm gonna just make some horrible assumptions here and throw out a couple of producers names. Right now, stylistically, it's falling into like the Antoine Jobard kind of style of a Meursault white, where you have a texture and weight to it with a correct precision. By taking it out of the new barrel and putting it into what I'm going to call an older barrel, which is going to be like a 4-year-old barrel, probably something that it's going to reduce the oxidative characteristic or evolution of the wine or slow it down a little bit, is going to possibly provide a level of tension. We're not going to go all the way to the Domaine rouleau kind of extreme, but we're going to start walking that ladder towards like Jean-François Germain out of Meursault as well, who you have a little bit more, maybe it's gonna express a little bit more of the terroir and a little bit less of the opulence and the richness of the oak. So either way, we're dealing with total minutia, okay? Because the wine is lovely, it's elegant, it has a presence to it. It's going to go really well with all different kinds of like a meal profile of things. It's not a chiseled, hard, steely rouleau, call it Domaine rouleau, nor is it like a very flat and flabby wine. So it's turning out to be a lovely. It's going to be a lovely drink for all involved in the project. So I think it's a great start for the relationship between us and hopefully the relationship with the syndicate.
Well, I have to say that's getting me salivating about the releases of the 19s in general in January. But do you want to move on to the red, Brian?
Before the red, I would like to keep the white where it is. That's my vote.
Cool.
Okay. Okay. And this is where it becomes complicated, because right now, if I look at my chart, we're looking at 50-50.
Exactly.
So, okay.
Judgments of Solomon.
So once again, we'll move on to the Dame de Charité. One of the best parts about the Dame de Charité, not only the fact that half of the cuvée is Rougian, call it haut or bas, and also petit epno, but it's that they have a certain volume at the Hospices, and where they're located, the Domaine de Montille Rougian bas and the Domaine de Montille Grand Epno provides me with a level of similarity and familiarity with the wines from the Hospice, because our Rougian bas is touching the Rougian bas from the Hospices de Beaune. The cuvée of Dame de Charité is a sizable enough cuvée that they're not doing any micro fermentations with this lot, meaning that it's always going to have a level of concentration because there's a volume to it that's going to ferment at a certain temperature that's pretty much always going to make a good wine. So it's a great cuvée to go with, and that's also for the future. Both these cuvées, and I'm not quite sure who is. I know one guy was holding the paddle, and the other guy was holding the man's hand down from raising it too often. But your two cuvées that you guys chose in 2019 are very, very good, safe cuvées for the Hospices de Beaune, because you've got good quality of price, because of Dame de Charité, you've got a lot of volume, and the Meursault, you have 50% of it or more is Premier Cru. So getting back to the wine in 2019, 19 has a little bit more concentration than 18, but like the concentration of the fruit, not necessarily concentration of the tannins and the structure. When you look at the Dame de Charité, you have terroirs that are rich enough terroirs that held on to moisture that we didn't have any vine stress in 2019, which cannot be said for all of 2019. In 2019, we had a lot of vine stress in Volnay. Anything that was Terre Blanche, we had a lot of vine stress. So in this particular case, you're looking at a really wonderful cuvée. The Dame de Charité cuvée, right off the bat, when I got the 6 barrels of Hospice, 2 being from Honest Grapes, I took 1 out of New Oak. Okay, so right off the bat, we're looking at a 50% oak profile instead of 100% New Oak. 100% New Oak, it will cloud the wine from showing its terroir, which is a little bit of the whole purpose of Burgundy, as we all know. There's certain cuvées from the Hospice that can handle 100% New Oak, and there's certain cuvées that don't necessarily need that, because we need to focus on the iron in the soil, like we have in the Dame de Charité, and we also need to focus on the calcareous soils, the limestone. So by doing it, it's the same thing that I do every year with the Dame de Charité cuvée is, and for you guys, I took it out of a brand new barrel. One of the barrels is still in a brand new barrel, and so now we're looking at 50% New Oak in the cuvée. Great concentration, great aromatic profile. The 19s are definitely a vintage that's going to be drunk before the 18s, because the 18s have a level of weight and strength and body to them. Definitely before what we're going to anticipate being the 20s, because the 20s are also another vintage very similar to 18 in that capacity. So you're looking at a wine that's going to be more on the pleasant, enjoyable side in an earlier fashion. And I say that this cuvée, if it's anything like the Montille cuvées that we make from Pommard at the same level, there's no hurry to drink the wine. But in the first 5 years, it's also going to be palatable and very enjoyable. And that's a little bit of the point and the purpose. Not everybody's looking to stock the wine. Not everybody has a place to stock the wine forever. But also, we want the wines to be digestif. We want the wines to be enjoyable. We want the wines to pair well with food. And that's the expression that I'm trying to go with. And and when I take, for example, the white, going back to the white, by taking that out of the New Oak and putting it into an older barrel, and by focusing a little bit more on the tension and the acid, to me brings it to making it a food wine towards that direction of enjoyable and have a certain level of acidity to cut through, whether it be a pasta or even a big for meat or fish or whatever it might be, something that's greasier, like fattier foods, in a way that when I leave something in more of a New Oak status and it becomes more opulent, it's more of a wine that I'm going to drink without a food pairing. I want to have on its own and something that's in a showy fashion. So coming back to the Pommard has great spice to it, good concentration of fruit. I don't know if we can see colors. Can you see color? Just kind of looks dark. Just kind of looks dark, really. But it is more translucent. Like I can see my fingers through the wine at this point in time. So we're looking at a level of extraction that is less than 2018, for example, for the darker concentrated 18 wines. More on the elegant and the soyeux side of things, but still with a presence and a nice body to it. So once again, another great start of the relationship for the syndicate and for Honest Grapes and for us. We have 2 wines that are showing really well. They're showing bright, they're showing fresh fruit, good texture and body to them, good weight to them, and nice acidity on the finish. So no complaints in that regards. And I don't think we could also rack these wines. If I don't want to create problems by throwing out options, as we all know. But what I can say is that when I would rack these 2 wines together for bottling, that would be in May. I would rack them in May. I'd let them sit for a month. I would then rack them off what has settled and then bottle them. Typically, we at Montille, we don't do a lot of filtering. We don't add any, the only thing we add to the wines is sulfur to help bacterial growth from taking over or dominating the wine. So we don't do a lot of intervention into the wine in that regard. So the idea is to have a wine that is pure, a wine that is transparent as much as possible, with the élevage in mind, with the winemaking in mind, and to have it express the terroir as much as we can. So by doing that, that is one of the reasons why I racked out 1 barrel. And I think at this point in time, we let the cuvée ride and we let it sit, and I'll barrel it, or I will bottle the Pommard at the same time as I bottle the Pommards from the Domaine. And the same way with the Meursault, I'm going to bottle the Meursault when I bottle the Meursaults from the Domaine. So that's the same kind of philosophy that I have. Treating the Hospice no differently than I would treat the wines from the Domaine.
Thank you so much. I popped a note in the chat, by the way, for those of you who are in the 2019 syndicate. If you can just drop your opinion, I see several people have in the chat. We'll add them up, and then Judgments of Solomon, Tom and Brian will confer and decide on that. On the white, sorry, that was going back to the white. Brian, that's really lovely news on the red. What I love about Pommard is that I always call it the Rioja of Burgundy, in the sense it's got a certain meatiness to it, which I really love, and that sounds just gorgeous. Oh God, I can't wait to get back out to Burgundy.
Yeah, it's got a what's interesting about this cuvée is it holds on to the blood orange characteristics that the iron soils of Pommard have, and the texture and the weight and the concentration and the dominant of it. It's really quite balanced and quite beautiful of a wine at this stage. So yeah, everything's through. Everything went through primary fine. Everything's through its secondary fermentation at this point, and it's just down in the cave and aging well. So
I'm conscious that we told everybody we'd be 3/4 of an hour, and we've got to move on to 2020. Can you tell us briefly about the, I've explained the way that Hospices Syndicate will work, maybe to talk about 2020 in terms of the report from Jasper Morris on the Hospices wines and the 3 kosher cuvées that you're doing for us at the moment.
Okay. Well, Jasper was here yesterday. I did a tasting with Jasper, the Domaine de Montille wines, and I think on Instagram, maybe he writes his tastings as to what he's been doing or what he has done. So I don't know if anybody goes onto Instagram.
I'm having a look now.
I think he's talked about what domains he's gone to, and I think I'm I'm not on Instagram, but apparently he said something about it. So what I can say is that I did talk to Jasper yesterday about the Hospices de Beaune program for 2020, and all is go, all is a green light on our end of things and on his end of things, meaning that Jasper definitely looks out for the people that do élevage for them. And we do I do kind of between 12 and 16 barrels of wine every year for the Hospices de Beaune. So we've become a good partnership in that regards. 2020, let's kind of break down 2020. Quite an interesting year for everybody, I'm sure, as with the COVID scenario that's been going around globally, and it's good to see that some of these guys have been able to travel a little bit, like coming back from Rome. That's good. I like that. But for us, I think a lot of the vignerons had a little bit of a check in 2020. They had the ability to stick around Burgundy a little bit more and focus a little bit more on a lot of things. What I can only say that 2020 was lacking was about 50 millimeters of rain in August. If we would have had 50 millimeters of rain in August, we would have had another year like 2018 in the sense of its quantities and its quality. What I can say about 2020 is it was the earliest harvest ever in Burgundy. We started, a lot of vignerons in the area started on the 20th of August, which means that you finish your growing season, you go on vacation, you come back from vacation, and you start harvest within the week that you've started, or the week you've been back. That being said, we've got great maturity, we've got great acid in 2020, meaning that there's a phenolic ripeness. There's a phenolic ripeness in the wines from 2020 that is a little bit shocking based on the shortness of the growing season. Yet there was a big acid persistence as well, and a big presence of the acid that we all had to wait for the acids to come in line with the alcohols to arrive at that phenolic maturity. That put us in the last 2 weeks of August for pick dates. We started with our whites and our Terre Blanche vineyards in Beaune, because those vineyards have very shallow soils. They don't hold on to a lot of moisture, and the wines ripen up very quickly. So with that scenario, we were chasing our tails, making sure that we were staying on top of things with doing vineyard samples and making sure that we weren't letting a vineyard fall through the cracks based on the speed of things, how they go. With the speed and the earliness of the vintage usually goes hand in hand with fermentations, and fermentations went very quickly in 2020. Extraction went very quickly in 2020, meaning that once you put your wine into your fermentation tank, 3 days later, it was inky dark Syrah color, without doing any manipulation or any cold soak. So those kind of parameters shot a lot of light bulbs off in a lot of our heads, saying that, hey, this vintage is going to be a lot like 2018. We want to do a short cuvée time, meaning that we only want the wine to sit on its skins for about 2 weeks or just over 2 weeks, and not necessarily go for our customary or our historic 3-week period. And which means that everything's done in a quicker fashion and a more timely, like a speedier fashion than typical. The reds are concentrated. The reds our reds are full of whole cluster. Haha, as I love whole cluster. The kosher wines, to bring in the kosher wines are both 100% whole cluster. Vonnet Brouillard is 100% whole cluster. Grand Epinot is 100% whole cluster. Both those cuvées were made 100% whole cluster in 2019. So whoever would come here to Burgundy to taste the 19, they could taste an example of what the potential kosher wine would be like in the in 2020. And all I can say is how would I describe my first kosher experience? It wasn't complicated. It wasn't difficult. It was easy. It was, you kind of work and communicate. Chemelot is a good guy to work with, and we had good communication. Fermentations went really well. Communication went really well. The wines turned out great. They've got great tannin structure and presence to them. They have, they're full of fruit profile. They're very similar to the 2018s in that regard for the reds. And there's no reason in my mind that they're not going to be the wonderful cracking wines. I'm not quite sure. I think Burgundy's gotten really lucky over the last few years. We've had some really, really warm vintages, really early vintages, and we've also been able to produce very qualitative wines from over these past years. Excuse me. I don't know if it's a fingers crossed thing. I don't know if it's just the moons are aligned. I don't know if we're just lucky. I don't know if this path can continue. All I know is that 2020 is another wonderful, cracking, beautiful year where the wines are fresh and bright and they have great acidity and they're going to come out really well. So that's talking about the reds. Why the whites are as beautiful and elegant as they are, I have no reason to explain that at all. 2020 whites, when we were making the 2014 whites, I kind of said to a lot of people, and when we started taking the 2014 whites in 2015 and 16, I said to a lot of people that I thought 2014 whites are it's the vintage of the decade, of the century for the whites. That's how I felt about the 2014 whites. And I still feel that about the 2014 whites. And go figure, we have a vintage, and 17 is a great year too. But 20 there's something about it. There's a fruit profile, there's a concentration, and there's an acidity profile to it that falls very similar in line with the 2014s. The acid is through the roof. The pHs are as low as can go. The texture has a great volume to it. Fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. We're obviously in the early stages of fermentation, primary and secondary for the whites. Most everything's done with primary fermentation, but they're just starting secondary fermentation. So a lot of lees are in suspension for the whites. The reds are all barreled down in the cave. The reds are all waiting to go through mallow or have started mallow slowly, but the weather has turned cold. It's rainy here now. The conditions are ideal. Fall has set in. So we've put the wines to bed for the winter in a way, and we'll see what happens in the springtime. But in the end, the potential of the 2020 vintage is excellent.
Wow, that's fascinating, Brian. I've got to say, it's
shocking.
Yeah, no, I remember last year a similar sense tasting the 2018 whites with a number of growers, and there was that same we can't quite understand how they've ended up as good as they have, because on paper we weren't necessarily expecting it with the whites, and yet that was a big surprise. So that's really encouraging that that you're saying again the 2020 whites seem to be, maybe it's that great notion. And I remember it was Etienne who said this to me years ago, was that great terroir sort of heals the vintage, or at least it takes any extremities and it actually mollifies them because of the quality of the terroir, because of the soil.
Yeah, and then that would definitely apply for the Chardonnay, because I mean, obviously we've all had great Chardonnays from all around the world. Pinot is a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more delicate, can be more susceptible. But Chardonnay has proven itself to be the noblest of all. And yeah, my excuse for 18 was there was a bountiful crop. It was a large vintage so it could handle the heat. I have no excuse for 2020. Why it would be showing as well as it's showing, or heading down that path or direction. So we'll see what happens, but it's very positive in a lot of ways. I mean, we all see where we're heading. We're not necessarily heading down a great path long term, we don't think. We all realize the urgency of things, but for right now, what we've put into the cave is, I guess what sums it up, since 2016, I haven't chaparralized or acidified any wines at all. So I haven't added acid or added any sugar at all in any of the wines, Domaine or Négus. And you guys know, for the people who know de Montille, our wines are very acid-based, acid-driven, very food profile. Yeah, we don't go to the lengths of certain domains in that regards, but the idea is we want to balance enjoyable, a good harmonization between fruit, oak, texture, and acid. Those are the proponents that we want to have in play. So yeah, fingers crossed, and we'll see what happens.
Since we're overrunning rather, Tom, if I just round up by giving the remainder of the process for the 2020 syndicate, and then, by all means, people who, I'm sure Brian would be happy to chat for a few more minutes, and people can go off for their dinner. So those of you who are already in the 2020 syndicate will be sending out the first invoices very shortly. The syndicate is about 2/3 full, coming up to 3/4 now. For those of you who haven't yet made your minds up, now is the time, because we need to juggle about and ask people how much white they want, how much red they want, and make sure we're all prepared for the Hospice auction, which is in 5 weeks' time from now. Yeah. But it does take some time for Tom and me to take soundings from Ludivine Cuvée, as we said, the regisseur. I think there's a lot of hope as well, Brian. It's her 6th year now. There's a lot of stability, a lot of knowledge of what the cuvées are going to be like, and very good to see Jasper Morris's comments on the vintage and what you've already told us about how that's worked in for your own harvest in Domaine de Montille. So we'll put the syndicate together. The rumours are, I think, Brian, that there's going to be the local clans only at a physical auction, and we're going to be on telephone or internet bids. I think that's the rumours. But in fact, Tom and not me this time, but for various personal things, but my lovely colleague Clémence are going out to Burgundy in the week before the Hospice auction to taste all of our 2019s that we'll be bringing into our Burgundy 2019 campaign immediately after Christmas, but also make sure we're prepared for our bid for the Hospice 2020. I hope as well, Brian, actually tasted the kosher cuvée that week with Tom as well.
Yeah. Well, what we can do is send me an email, Tom or Clémence, send me an email and tell me when you're going to be here. And what we can do is we can have Shimolo or a colleague of his be here within a day or two to pull a sample, and we'll take care of it.
It's always the word. It happened to Tom and me. I won't say with which producer, but 3 years ago, Tom and I were going around, and a message hadn't been passed on, and the producer had just sulfited all his Vin Romanée. not the best time to taste. Yeah, anyway, Tom, should we call the formal bit to a halt if anybody wants to stay on for a few more words with Brian? But remember, he's an hour nearer to his dinner than we are. So, yeah. Tom, any final words from you?
No, I'm looking forward to coming out with Clémence. Brian, thank you so much for this evening. Again, font of knowledge. It's great to get your insights on both the 19s and the 20 vintage. It's going to be a real pleasure to taste with you as always. So, and thanks again, really, for giving up so much of your time for our projects and this evening. It's really appreciated.
Lovely. Does anybody want to stay on for any questions or anything? Does anybody have any questions? I think we have Clive might hand a hand up, maybe.
Yes.
Or-
Anybody
Graham?
who wants to drop off for dinner, please feel welcome. We'll stay for a few more minutes.
Well, you guys, anybody, if anybody has any questions, either way, they can always email Nathan or Tom, and then you guys can relay a question to me, and I can file off a response real quickly. And also, what I can do with you, Nathan, is maybe when I find out when Chalumeau is going to come back up, either the end of this week or early next week, maybe we can do just a 5-minute recap over the wines, just to give you a global perspective on what's going on with the 2020s, if you want.
We might even do a very short Zoom and record it so that people can see it.
Okay.
It's like a 10-minute
Yeah.
tasting of the three and do it so people can see it.
Easy.
So I mean, actually, my main question for you about the 20s is you clearly want to do different cuvées this year. Do you have any feeling yet? I mean, you know, my instinct would be to do Volnay this year. But what's your feeling about where, you know, or is it just too early to know?
You know what I can do? I can we always have a certain chouchou in the cave, like something that's just cracking and kicking is just perfect in the cave. But what I can do to give you a bigger picture, because that sometimes the wines that come out of our cave in a certain year isn't necessarily representative of the general area. What I can do is I can taste through. I've tasted through a couple of caves. I tasted at Lafon with Dominique last week, and I just tasted with Thomas Boulet today. And I'm going to see.
Brian.
It's part of work, Nathan. It's part of work. I'm seeing Frédéric Lafarge day after tomorrow. But what I can do is I can kind of I have a couple ideas as to what's showing really well. But right now, like the bones have been showing really well from I know that might not necessarily be the most easy sellable wine, but it's also affordable.
I mean, funny enough, Tom and I keep discussing this because, you know, Beaune is something I would just not buy in the past, but it has gone up so much in the world. Just as on the whites, you know, for me, you know, 20 years ago, I wouldn't dream of buying Meursault. It would be Puligny, Chassagne, Meursault. Now it's in general, not about Domaine de Montille. Now it's Meursault, Chassagne, Puligny. But Beaune Premier Crus are quite wonderful now.
Well, with the climate change, the tannins have softened. The wines are becoming phenolically ripe. They have heavy enough soil to hold on to moisture, so they don't have as much vine stress. Now, I'm not saying that the other villages are suffering. What I am saying is that you've seen not an equalization, but a raising of the bar from the Beaune cuvées in general that have brought them to a little bit different stature than what we've seen in the past. In 2020, Côte du Beaune is right now showing more consistent than the Côte de Nuit.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So the Volnay Pommard Beaune is a great place to be in or start in.
But back to my idea of Volnay. What do you think of the Volnays so far for 20?
Well, you know, the Moutot is already a mix of like Miton, Champon, and Taille.
Yes.
Between me and you,
never heard of any of them.
Yeah. How can you go wrong? How can you go wrong with those? You know, so there's certain cuvées that every year have a tendency to show really well from the Hospice. I do not, you know, if you can get your paws on Volnay Moutot.
That was on the short list for
last year was on the short list, exactly.
Yeah.
So those are, but that being said, there's other things that are going to show really well, and I don't think 2020 might not necessarily be a year that for the red terroirs, the grand terroirs, there might not be as big of a difference as other vintages.
Right.
Years that are more on the elegance and delicacies of the vintage that's going to express the terroir, instead of the concentration of the fruit like we had in 2020, might be years where you need to focus on certain cuvées more than other cuvées. In 2020, you might be able to have more margin for error regarding your cuvées and more options in that regard.
I think the other thing to consider for the syndicate members will be that the staying power of Volnay is, and particularly something like Montille, is considerably different than the Beaune wines.
Yeah.
Is it a long build wine? Is it a long hold wine or a short hold? But interesting.
Yeah, that comes down to people's interest and needs. But when you look at our Beaune Grève, for example, I had a 15-year-old Beaune Grève the other day that was cracking. So it's not Beaune terroirs are not necessarily all created equal.
Yeah. It's going to be a fun one, and I'm even more jealous of Tom and Clémence. This will be the first year for a while I haven't come out.
We'll take some photos, make you really jealous, Nick.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, much appreciated.
Yeah.
On which note, Brian, should we let you get to your dinner?
Exactly. Brilliant. Brian, thanks so much. That's fascinating. As I said, can't wait to come out and see you. Henry and Daniel, who stayed on, brilliant to see you both as well. Hope you'll join us for the journey this year. And thank you everyone else. But Brian, brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Bye, guys.
Cheers all.
Thanks, Brian.